So I'm Daniel Hallinan, and I got my NSF CAREER Award on my third try, and that was about 2.5. I guess I applied about almost 3 years ago, and I applied to the polymers program in DMR.
Yeah. So not a lot of diversity for me. I'm actually funded through the same program officer, the same program, DMR polymers. I got it on my second try, and that application went in 2017, so I was awarded in 2018. And I think that's an interesting point to make, is that some of these programs can be a catch-all for different areas, fields, from chemistry to engineering. And so, trying to look at these different programs and finding a home for your research is, I think, an important part of this process.
Right, because you're in chemistry, you're in engineering.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Mainak Mookherjee. I'm in the Earth Science Department, Earth, Ocean and Atmospheric Science Department. So I applied to the Division of Earth Sciences, which is under the Directorate of Geoscience. And I applied in 2017 and I got the same year, 2018. And that was my first try.
First, second, and third. That's the first time we
Yeah.
had that. Okay, so they all have different experiences. Some got reviews, some did not get reviews. Some people get lucky or maybe it's not luck, maybe you just knew what they needed to hear, I don't know. But I thought instead of me going into a lot of questions, you may have questions already, and if not, I will jump in. Who would like to start with the question?
So we've heard a lot about integration of research and education plans. I'm curious about your broader impacts and whether you made an effort to connect that back to both of the research and education components as well, or how did you treat that third component?
So broader, I like to think of broader impacts as two different types, like maybe actually I guess 3 different types. Scientific, so that might be like you develop a model or you develop something that then is of interest to other fields. And so, intellectual merit is going to impact your own field, but you can scientifically impact other fields if you develop a pretty general model. Then there's sort of the more technological or applied broader impacts of, let's say we're generating new knowledge in an area. I work in batteries, and it leads to longer lasting batteries so electric vehicles can drive further. And then, of course, the educational broader impacts, which are, I think, really important in the NSF career. And in terms of integrating educational outreach and research, that's where I put a lot of emphasis. For me, I didn't do anything fancy. I basically developed what I considered was a somewhat novel educational outreach plan and had the content that plan was trying to educate the public and middle school children and other people that we were planning to interact with about the new knowledge that we're generating on the research side. So it was a pretty simple connection, but it seemed to work.
Yeah. So I think my broader impacts were reviewed quite well both times. I really tried to put some emphasis onto that area of the proposal because I know that the career proposal is supposed to be unique in the sense that you have that component more highlighted. And I think it was about 1/3 of the proposal's length was the broader impacts. So about 10 pages for the research, 5 pages for the broader impacts. And yeah, Daniel hit the nail on the head there. There's going to be some broader impacts if your research does what you hoped it would, right? You're going to broadly impact science or improve some societal problem. But where I also made sure to integrate the further broader impacts, I guess, would be through actions that I was going to take. So I think I proposed a 3-point broader impacts plan that I called classroom, collaboration, and community, or something like that, right? It's always great if you can
Alliterate?
alliterate, right? And And then I went into detail about each one of these and what I was going to do. So the classroom was I was going to develop some new curriculum that we never had at in our department before. And then offer that to undergraduates, which I think was reviewed very well because you can expand undergraduate education. They always look favorably on that. And then community or collaboration was just basically the phase that we're in right now. It's gathering people that have similar interest in research at the university and seeing if we can come together and do some more collaborative work. Then the community is kind of easy when you work in plastics. It's something that you can tangibly talk in a layman's style to pretty much anyone about. And what we've noticed in Tallahassee is there's a lot of people that benefit from some general education about plastics. They have some common misconceptions. So we've been going out to certain events and just educating about plastics and all that. So that's how I did it, and that was reviewed quite well.
Well, I totally agree with what Daniel and Justin referred to in terms of the broader impact. There are different components that I also tried to address, particularly how it impacts the other subdisciplines of our broad discipline of geosciences. But I paid special emphasis to the education component and not just the usual education, which I'll do in any case, like for instance, undergraduate education is expected out of any proposal outright that, okay, how it's impacting the undergraduate education. So I emphasized on how I'm going to reach out to the community at large, particularly middle school and high school students, and engage them in my kind of research. And not in general terms that, okay, they will be essentially exposed to STEM sort of research, but certain fundamental aspects of any research will have those STEM components. I wanted to highlight those aspects. For instance, much of my research does look into the behaviors of materials, particularly earth materials, using spectroscopy. And I broke it down to, let's say, how light and matter interacts. For instance, that would be more palatable for middle school and high school students. To make a track record of how I'll engage them, I started participating in the YSP program hosted by, which is facilitated by FSU in the summer months, and I worked with at least 4 YSP students prior to writing, so to demonstrate that I have been working with them in a consistent manner, and I continue to work with them as well. I also interacted with the Leon County School. I invited middle school students to my lab and demonstrated them how light and matter interacts, for instance, and then of course showed them a variety of minerals. Some of the properties of minerals will be very fascinating to them. They haven't probably seen double refractions and so on. So these were essentially the things that I did prior to even writing the proposal, and I tried to integrate that component, not just a usual set of goals like that I'll essentially go from postdoc to undergraduate. That is something that's pretty much canned, and it is expected in any kind of proposal. So what's beyond that is something that they might be looking for. That's what I thought. And also not just a normal STEM thing. It should be also something that comes from the proposal itself, what kind of ideas that I'm writing in the proposal and how that translates to this sort of education that I'm trying to address that as well.
Can I add one thing just about, because I mentioned novel educational outreach, and so you might be sitting there thinking, well, what's novel educational outreach? And what I came upon, I had the realization that that's actually an opportunity for you to integrate your personal and your professional life. You can take communities you interact with, outside of the office and do outreach to them, or you can take interests you have outside of the office. And it can't be a stretch, right? It has to make some sense, but that might be some way to think about how to propose something that the reviewers aren't going to say, this is run-of-the-mill, broader educational outreach plan, right? The other thing you can do that is going to make you unique is use existing infrastructure that we have here in Tallahassee that maybe they don't have anywhere else in the country. And so if you're taking advantage of that, that lessens the load on your actual educational outreach effort, but also brings a component of uniqueness or novelty to your educational outreach. So those are some things maybe to think about as you try to develop something. Because it's nice to have something that stands out on the broader impact side too, to the reviewers, where, oh wow, this is a cool idea. It might be something really simple, but something that they haven't read before. You know, these are usually very experienced reviewers, so they've read a lot of proposals, and so they've seen a lot of different educational outreach ideas, and so to have something that stands out to them is definitely beneficial, I think, and so that's something you want to give some thought to.
Can I ask, did all of you contact your program officer before you applied?
Of course.
Okay.
I did the
See,
FAT, that's what I did.
do what?
The funding, did you still do that? The funding agency travel?
Yeah.
The FAT grant? That's
Yeah.
what I did, yeah. Went and met him.
So the Office of Research under the CRC has funding agency travel grant. And you get travel up to $1,000 to go talk to a program officer. It's hardly ever taken advantage of, and the chances you're gonna get it are really high, you know, if you can still fly and all of that. Take advantage of that. The other question or the next question I had, and then I'll give it back to you guys, is for the two that did not get it the first time, did you talk to your program officers after you got your reviews? And was it helpful?
Yeah, I can start. So we are lucky to have a very proactive program manager. So like he comes to a conference that I regularly go to, so I had face-to-face interaction with him. But I would mention that's definitely not essential. You can ask any questions that you need to ask over the phone. So it's not essential to go to DC, but it is essential to have communicated with your program manager. So he actually called me after he sent me my reviews, but via email, and then immediately called me on the phone. So yeah, I talked to him, and he was proactive about it. But it's valuable because there's a lot of discussion that occurs in the panels that doesn't make it into the individual reviews and the panel summary. And so your program manager, I mean, of course, I'm very comfortable with mine, so I ask him questions, and if he says it's not an appropriate question, he just doesn't answer it, right? I don't have to worry about that, but they can help you read in between the lines in these things, especially if you haven't received many reviews and you don't know, you know, the reviewers sometimes use like pretty heavy euphemism when they mean something, but want to be like nice about it. And unfortunately, that means that it's not quite as clear what you actually need to change. And so talking to program manager, I think is really valuable.
Yeah, Andy's great. Andy Lovinger is our program officer. He emailed me after sending me the first rejection and then wanted to set up a call to discuss. So I guess this is a rare thing. I mean, I've interacted with other program officers at the NSF, and some of them are also very nice and very outgoing. They might not all be, I don't know. But yeah, Andy went through the panel review sort of line by line and emphasized a little bit more. So for example, my first submission was way too much chemistry. He just came right out and said it. He's like, there's too much chemistry in here. There's too much going on. You've got to take out some of this complexity and all this stuff and focus in on elaborating more on how you're going to develop the material. And this is a classic Andy line. Andy likes it when there's not too much chemistry. There's like a finite amount of chemistry that he wants to have in his proposals, or else it should go to the chemistry division, right? And so yeah, I just basically was trying to type everything he was saying as fast as he was saying it into my laptop so that I could go back and, you know, when it was time to start rewriting the proposal, look at these bullet points that he had said, okay? And the first few weeks after your rejection it's not a good time to start redoing your proposal, right? Just listen to your program officer, get all that put down into a Word file, save it and forget about it for about 3 or 4 weeks, right? And then go diffuse, because you do have a high level of emotion, I think, when you get a rejection, and giving it some time always helps, and you can come back at it more constructively, I think. Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, 2 months, and you go back and read them again, and you realize the reviewers are right.
Yeah, this was way too much. Yeah, exactly.
Not that they're, yeah, anyway, your anger dissipates, or whatever your strong emotion, depression, negative, insert negative emotion here.
What is the timeline for hearing back, both for negative and positive?
Yeah.
Mine was pretty similar, actually. I heard before the end of December. In fact, that was for rejection even. When it got funded, I'm pretty sure it was like a day or two before Thanksgiving, because I remember him saying enjoy your Thanksgiving. So pretty early, for this. But keep in mind that it depends on, I think, where your proposal falls, right? If you're borderline, then it might be a lot longer right? So my first two, I guess, were that bad. And but my third one was good enough that it was, there was no question. So, yeah. So if you're at one of the extremes, you're going to hear pretty quickly, probably. And it's only if you're on the borderline, then you need to figure out the budget, that it's going to take a while.
Which I can directly speak to, because I was at the cut line, I think, for both submissions. And so I was brutally waiting. People are hearing, you're on Twitter, you're seeing people like, oh, I got it. And you're like, yay, what about me, right? And you're still waiting. And I think, so we submit the end of July. That's when our due deadline was. And so I didn't hear both times until March of the following year. I think it was March. And it was late March, too. Because I remember that there was quite a few people that were finding out before I did. And so if you don't know how this works, there's the yeses and the nos, and then there's a whole range of people in the maybes. And they don't know exactly what their budget's going to be. And usually there's a handful, maybe not more, of people that are in the maybe section of the maybe, right? And if you're in that section, that's good because you don't hear no that quickly, right? But you might be waiting a while. And so, yeah. And generally what you're looking for is an email from your program officer requesting a update to your current and pending support or whatever. And that's a good sign that discussions on funding it are about to happen.
Well, I heard from my program manager at one of the conferences that I attend every year, and in December, that's a fall American Geophysical Union meeting, so I have a habit of meeting the program managers all the time whenever I go, and they have been very helpful. In fact, I didn't have any rejection for the career, but I've had lots of rejection in the past for my normal proposals. So I have a habit of getting feedback, and they have been really supportive. And as I also gathered from you guys, that it depends on different programs what your program manager is, but they are very supportive of early career folks. So all the early rejections of normal proposals, I took serious considerations of the reviewers' comments, and so as a routine, I also went and met with them, and I got to know in person that they are going to offer, but I think at that moment of time, I think there was some kind of Congress had some shutdown or something, so I didn't really get the email until end of December, and then the final reward letter came, I think, sometime in March or something of that sort. So it was like a stepwise process. It was not instantaneous that you're awarded. They gave me some confirmation that we will be awarded or so, but they were working on the budget issue. They were closed down, or I forget the terminologies. There was something else.
They're shut down.
Yeah, so they can't work or they can't issue any kind of award or something of that sort happened in that year.
Yeah, I think they didn't get their budget, and so when they don't have a budget, they can't know
Yeah,
what they're working with.
something of that sort, yeah.
And I can chime into that too, because I've been tracking them for the last at least 5 years. And usually the yeses and nos, we get a lot of yeses and nos before Christmas. And then it slowly trickles in after that. This year we have one who has been told she's being recommended for funding. Hers is taking longer because they're splitting it between 2 directorates, which is unique. And she'll be our first social science funded career winner at FSU. But we still have 8 that are sitting in limbo. So you just don't know. They have to figure out where it falls and how much money they have left. And we've had them to as late as June come in. with an answer, which is just brutal because you can't really, you don't know if you need to be working on reapplying and you don't have feedback to reapply. We had one person, I know one year that I want to say it was beginning in June, and he had to skip that next year because he didn't have time to take in the feedback and rewrite and submit. So he sat out a year because of that. I'm hoping by the end of this month we have our last 8 in and we get at least 2 more, keep it to the 5 we've been getting every year. But yeah, yeses and nos. If you hear a no in October, you probably have a lot of work to do.
Yeah. So April 9th is when I got the email requesting additional materials. So
Was
that- April 9th, yeah, 2018. So, and
Yeah.
then it was almost a month later that I actually got the award email. So
Yeah.
it takes a little bit of time, even when things are looking up. So
So be patient.
Concerning the education part, I forgot to mention one thing, since you were mentioning that 2 directors funded some of the career awards. I mean, I did add a bit of resource for the education components. One of my program manager mentioned that, if you write about education and if there's no budget for that, it sometimes cannot look that you're serious about those aspects. So I added just a little bit for the education component, that maybe I'll do something in Challenger Center for which I can invite students from different underprivileged schools and so on. So I did actually have that component, and that component comes from the Directorate of Education, and that sometimes is underfunded. It takes time for them, or maybe not underfunded, but I don't know about the details. That takes a little bit of time for them to realize what kind of budget they have. So this kind of things might also delay the ultimate grant, because the grant gets split between various programs. So, yeah, what I wanted to say is that I have that component as well, bit of budget for the impact on education. So, that's good.
What was your balance between, in terms of the total of the 15 pages you had in the narrative section, what was your balance between research and educational activities? In terms of like page length?
Well, you answered that. Mine, I think, was something around 10 research, 3.5 to 4 education, and then 1 for, like the intellectual merit, broader impacts, like boilerplate stuff.
Very similar to what Justin mentioned. It was 1/3 of broader impact on education component, and in which I had the privilege of looking at some of the proposals that were uploaded by NSF from you guys, and I think they were quite serious in which they actually referred to articles in which they were seriously talking about how education component will be integrated. So I also went along those lines, looked into the aspect how geoscience education can be brought into schools, and what kind of stuff can be made more accessible through daily examples. So I looked into those kind of pedagogical articles, and I referred those in my broader impact section.
Question, I think it's a two-parter. How early is too early to contact your program manager with relation to your idea for the career? I'm not planning on, I know some people in this room aren't planning on submitting until 2021. And what would you recommend at this stage to be doing?
Well, I mean, I guess if you have developed your idea enough that you can write a 1-page summary, then you could contact the potential program, at the very least, just to determine if it's actually suitable for your idea, right? Because you don't want to put an exorbitant amount of effort into developing something that you can't find a home anywhere at NSF for. So you want to make sure there's some program that what you're excited about fits into. So I don't think it would. I don't think there's too early, as long as you've developed your idea enough that you can articulate it.
yeah, I mean that's good. I think I was pretty proactive. I mean, I kind of knew Andy would be one of the people that, if it wasn't for the career, I would be submitting him proposals for normal cycles anyway. So I knew that Andy was somebody that I wanted to establish contact with. Again, I used that funding agency travel, and when I kind of got the dates set up, I emailed program officers from every area that I thought might be within a wheelhouse of my ideas. So there's a program in chemistry called macromolecular supermolecular, emailed Suqua, and then I emailed the catalysis, forget his name. And what it is, I tried to set up as many meetings as possible. I went there with 3 shingles, each a one-page summary of a research idea that I had, and I just kind of floated them in front of the program officers and said, here, this is what we're interested in. No preliminary data, all hopes and dreams, right, at that point. And yeah, Andy was like, this one looks like the most fitting for my program. That one's too much chemistry, but this one I think looks good for our program. And so that was actually quite useful, because then I could sort of structure the idea better for the program. And you're also going to get, it's not very often that a program officer is going to say, no, don't submit that to us. You'll find that a lot of them are very generous, and they're like, oh yeah, that could work in our program. So I would advise going into the awarded proposals of that program and seeing if you can find colleagues that you know work in the same type of area, or just similarities between what you want to do and what's being funded in that program, because that can help guide your decision between 2 competing programs.
I don't think they'll ever say no, but they might say, you should check out this program. And that's kind of like saying no.
Yeah.
And you should check out that program, because oftentimes it's a good fit. I mean, they know them, they work there full time, so they know.
So you had a question back here.
So, my question is, when you submitted second time, how did you say that you addressed the comments from the first one, or how did you go about it? Or did you go for the same idea again, or you went further?
I did not say I addressed the comments from the first time, because my rationale was, it's not like the NIH where they know what's happened before. And so all that's really doing is drawing attention to the reviewers of something that was pointed out as a weakness. So instead, I would say that I significantly modified my proposal each time, because I rewrote, 2 times. And I essentially tried to prevent having those weaknesses in the proposal, and didn't say, look, I changed it to address these. I didn't change the proposal, I changed the project. It was still the same idea, it was still addressing the scientific questions that I found most exciting, but it was just coming at it in a little bit different way and organizing the work plan and the specific work a little bit differently.
Yeah, that's same for me. I went through I really absorbed the comments first after some downtime, and then I had to gut about 5 pages out of my research section of my proposal, and then expand to help satisfy some of the program manager's comments. It's really what I focused most on, because those are helpful between the lines type of comments. So it was quite different. I don't know if it was a thing back then, even though it's not too long ago, but last year when I resubmitted to chemistry, a regular cycle, the program officer wanted me to submit a page that was dedicated to what you changed about your proposal. I guess they have a problem with people just resubmitting the same proposal, I don't know. But he wanted a 1-page summary of how this had addressed or been changed. I don't know if I didn't have to do this for the career at all. So I don't know if this is a new NSF thing or a specific to that program officer thing. But yeah, I didn't pretend I didn't put any sentences in there that said, the last time someone didn't like this, so I've changed it to this. I never said anything like that. I just listened to the program officer and made changes as if it was a first submission again. Yeah.
I have a question real quick. So this is not a huge amount of money over the amount of time. How do you feel it's helped you in your career?
Well, it's 5 years. So that's pretty huge, because you can focus on the project for 4 and not have to think about writing another proposal to keep the project going. So that in and of itself, even though it's only funding, 1 graduate student and all the other things that need to be happening, for me, that's valuable. The 5 years is really valuable. The other thing is it brings like a significantly increased level of credibility. And what I mean by that is you don't have to work as hard in other proposals you write to prove to the reviewers that you can do what you say you're going to do. I think having this, career awardee on your bio sketch really takes you to a higher level of credibility. So I think that's really valuable, right? Because that's going to increase with lower effort, increase the probability of proposals getting funded.
Yeah, I mean, and these typically come into your life right around the time that your startup package or whatever your startup money is also going out of your life. And so the realization that you've got to pay the bills every month becomes very real. And again, this isn't a ton of money, but it's going to keep you going, right? Even if this is the only grant you get, it's enough to keep your research going. So it's very valuable for 5 years as well. So you get some travel funds out of it. You'll get some materials and supply out of it. You get to have at least one student full-time on the grant at any time, at any moment. A little bit of summer salary is not bad either, and it's certainly not going to, make you a large, rich research group, but it'll do the job of taking off some of that pressure for sure.
Yeah, same here. It helps expand your group a little bit. Gives you a little bit of peace of mind that you have funds for 5 years. So I've been using my funds to support all the postdoctoral scholars that I have who's working with me at this moment. And I will also fund a graduate student for 3 years. So that will essentially take a little bit of the personal, and then I also have some consumables and other things for my research, so that really helps keep coming for 5 years. It is a continuing grant, so every year I have incremental enhancements there. But at the same time, it also helps with the early career folks with the help with the process of tenure. I guess many of the reviewers would be looking at the profile. They find the career as an important benchmark that you have some credibility as Daniel was putting in. So that helps.
So if I have an NSF proposal submitted on a particular idea, which is currently under review, is it okay to take a part of that idea or a derivative of that idea and put that as part of my career?
Yeah. I mean, so the advice I've been given by program managers is if there's significant overlap between two proposals and they both get funded, you have to decline one. But there's no rule against submitting the same proposal even to multiple divisions of NSF or multiple funding agencies. It's not like there's any sort of like unethical component to that. But what would be unethical is if you got funded by two different agencies for the same or very similar proposals and you accepted both. So it's the funded part, right? And so with 10% funding rate, that's a strategy you could take. I don't ever take that because I guess I'm not that much of a gambling person, and I'd hate to have to decline a funded proposal I've submitted. So I've never done that personally, but there's no inherent problem with that. At least that's what I've been told by program managers at different agencies I've talked to. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, that's what I've heard. I've heard, this doesn't need to be something that looks like what you worked on for your postdoc. I mean, they want to see that you're doing something different than that. But as far as unique, something new, you could be putting it to DOE and NSF or something. But, that'd be a great problem to have.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
So to answer that, to address that a bit further, I think what I've heard from our program managers is that some amount of overlap is okay, as Daniel was mentioning. In fact, if that is something that your skills it shows that you already have a track record or skill set on that area, but you're applying it to something else, that's perfectly okay. In fact, a little bit of overlap on that area might actually make your case even stronger. That success rate is likely to be higher if your skill sets are being drawn from some previous experience and a little bit of overlap. That actually be helpful.
I wonder how many new data did you put in your proposal? Or you submit?
Preliminary data, you mean?
Yeah.
First one was very bleak. Yeah, I'll answer that question with a more broader perspective. If you're submitting for the first time within the first 2 years of your independent career, they see that. They know that this is your first shot, that you're really early on, that your preliminary data is going to be very early on as well. If you're submitting your first attempt in your 4th year, they're going to see that too. They're going to maybe see that you're 4 years in and might have some more preliminary data to show for that. I guess what I'm getting at here is I have never heard anyone say that you have to have X amount of preliminary data for your career proposal to be funded favorably. It certainly doesn't hurt if you have some tangible progress to sort of show that you've got some momentum. But I don't ever recall hearing,
I think we've been advising them that if they just got here last fall, they probably need to go through a year and apply their second year so that
Yeah.
they can take that buyout money and do some preliminary work. You know, because you've got 3 shots and you've got about 5 years to do it in. So
Yeah.
the first year is not always the ideal.
yeah, this is my second year that my first shot was my second year, my second shot was my 3rd year.
Yes.
So that was good.
So with regards to preliminary data, I think in my case, I already had 2 other NSF awards funded. They were not career awards. So I already had some publications out of those. So those were, in every year I have to send in reports, so those were already there. But I totally agree with Beth. In fact, I was in one of these kind of gatherings in 2016, I believe, and one of the panelists commented that there was a question, if a person already has an NSF award, are they ready to submit the career? Because there are only 3 chances. And the answer that I received, this is not a question that I asked, but I took it to heart and I acted accordingly, is that if you already have some grants from your prior institutions based on your career path, even then in a new institution you ought to, at least if you're a person who works on experiments or some sort of data, you ought to establish yourself in this particular institution. So I waited for a year to have my lab functioning and generate some data out of that, and after that I applied. So I didn't really apply immediately, although I had some track record based on previous funding, if that helps.
And you think that helps you?
Yeah.
A formula that I really like, although I guess there are exceptions because I have written a proposal with basically no preliminary data, right? But it was just like a really exciting idea and really novel. Like no one had done anything in this like material class before for batteries. So lacking that, the formula I like to follow is a paper that is a manuscript, I should say, that's just about ready for submission or has just been submitted, makes it a lot easier to write a proposal, generally, whether it's career or not, because you've already not only collected preliminary data, but thought through how to analyze the data and thought through what the story of that data is. And so you just kind of, can spring from the beginning of a story, which is the prior work section of your preliminary work, whatever you want to call it, section of your proposal. So I find, for me, as is probably apparent from me not getting it until my 3rd try, proposal writing is not something that came easily to me. And so to ease that process, I find that, I know how to write a scientific manuscript, and so you can just sort of use that as a base to build from. That's a formula that I've sort of taken to now, and I find it works for me at least.
I think Justin maybe explain his interactions with the director. Would you also tell me how did you interact?
Oh yeah, actually, thank you. I wanted to say something about that. Never hesitate to contact a program manager if you have a question, even if you've already talked to them 4 or 5 times. In fact, it's good for them to get to know your name and your face, and so the more contact you have with them, the better, I would say. That would be my biggest comment, right? So it's not like I just talk to a given program manager once. If I'm going to apply to that program, usually I've talked to them 2, 3, or even, if it's a resubmission, more times than that. So So don't hesitate to reach out. I mean, be respectful, you know, even if you already know them, it's a good idea to send an email to set up a phone call and not just cold call them, even if it's not really cold, even if you already know them. But don't hesitate to reach out multiple times. I think that's a good thing.
Other questions?
Have any of you guys applied for any of the other early career awards, like the DOE one or the NASA one? Can you talk a little bit about the differences between the NSF Career and those other early career?
Yeah, so I did a nonlinear path, so my age gave me one shot at the early career Army, I believe it was.
Mhm.
Yeah, and it was a train wreck. Like I submitted this great grandiose idea. It was early on. I was running out of time. I didn't have a lot of preliminary data, and it was very. I'll say this: one of the big differences between the reviews of that and the reviews of the NSF is I think the NSF really is about basic research, right? Fundamental basic research, and this one came back very much about picking it apart about applied. How are you going to apply that to this or apply it to that? And that's just the nature of the beast, I think, with the DoD and the Army and all that. They want to actually tangibly make a applied outcome from it. So that was a big difference, but it was so early on that I don't think it was a good reference anyway. It was, yeah.
I have tried for ONR, Navy's YIP, Young Investigator Proposal, I guess, program. And I've tried for NASA once, but haven't been funded on any of them. DOE, I don't think I've tried DOE. I didn't try DOE because of the way things fell. And didn't make eligibility.
So, no, I didn't apply for any of the career funds from NASA or DOE, so I don't have any reference to compare.
But I guess I didn't finish answering your question. I can't say with really any confidence how they're different because I wasn't funded, so, you know, I don't. And I'm not really totally sure what components of it were the reason it wasn't funded. I mean, I would agree with Justin generally that DoD definitely, even though they say TRL, Technology Readiness Level 1 to 3, their one is a lot different from my one. At least I'll say it that way.
I have one question. So I think the main difficulty for me is to find some of the topic, the research. So how much was it you know, depending on your postdoc or your previous expertise, and secondly, how much was it new to the society? Well, was it a brand new idea, or was it kind of incorporating some existing idea and your expertise on it? Can you add some comments for this?
Okay. So there's a book called, what's it called? Gosh, Where Good Ideas Come From. And it talks about the adjacent possible. So, you know, you don't want to propose something that's so new and novel that viewers aren't going to appreciate it. But what I would say, I would take your question and not answer it, but give you other advice, which is what I would recommend you do, because you're going to spend 5 years on this thing if it gets funded, is figure out what scientific question or questions are most exciting to you, because that excitement's going to come out in the proposal, and figure out a way to study, to answer those questions, or at least to like answer aspects of those questions. Ideally, that would be with like a new approach, whether, you know, it's, I don't know whether you do computational work or experimental work, but maybe apply a new approach to an existing material or apply an existing technique to a new material. You know, I think there needs to be a significant level of novelty, but there also needs to be excitement, and I think there needs to be a need. So I guess what I mean by that is that this question, if it's exciting to you and you know that area inside and out, which you should know the literature for that area if you're writing a career proposal for it inside and out, probably there are other people out there that are interested in that question too. And if you can come up with a cool way to try to answer it, they're going to appreciate that. So I know I didn't really answer your question, but.
No, it's a good point, yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, I'll just briefly say that it's a living organism, the research sometimes. Like you come in, you give an interview, you have 3 ideas, you hope that gets you the job. And then you get started and 2 of them don't work. And so the 3rd one's your last hope. But then suddenly you're working on something completely different that you didn't even plan on working on. And that's exactly what my career was on, a project that I didn't even have on my radar when I first started. I had a good student that got some results we didn't expect, and we just kept going in that direction, right? And the second time I submitted was different than the first time because that entire year had gone by and I started thinking about different ways that we could potentially develop this technology or use it for different things. So it's always living. I think what you've established now is an expertise in some broadly defined area, and you can go after, like Daniel was saying, something that you're passionate about, something that really excites you for research.
Totally agree. I mean, when I wrote my career, the ideas that I was exploring were not new per se, but the way I was integrating various components to address the problem was novel, in the sense that I was trying to relate material properties to larger questions of how, let's say, the solid part of the earth affects the water level on the surface. That means essentially sea level. It's an idea that has been exploited for a long time in the earth science community, but the way I was looking at it is essentially from a material perspective, and I was combining both experiments and theory. The approach was novel and to the reviewers from that perspective, but the idea was not something new. So,
Thanks.
And I really like the point about go into something you really have an interest in, because you're gonna be married to this for 5 years. And if you don't really enjoy it, that's what you're gonna be doing, so, and the enthusiasm.
Mhm.
There's some flexibility too, I think. With NSF proposals, you could propose, this grandiose thing, but you get sidetracked on one of these little branches and you spent a whole year on something that you didn't focus on much in the proposal, but it still lies in the same general category of the research. And so you have some freedom, I think. Yeah.
So tell me, you submit annual reports. So say that happens, what do you say?
Well, I was honest. I had a PhD student leave with a master's at the start of my 2nd year, and I wasn't able to pick up a new student until the end of my 2nd year, right before I submitted the report. So luckily, we made really good progress on our educational outreach, but the research basically stalled, and I had talked earlier in the year to the program manager and said, told him about my situation and said, should I think about hiring a postdoc instead of trying to find a graduate student so I can get back on track? And he said, no, don't do it. It's too early to do that. You can always submit a no-cost extension. So I just, submitted an annual report that didn't have any papers published, and just told him what had happened and what our plan was going forward, and spent a lot of time talking about the progress we've made on our educational outreach, which we have made a lot actually. I got my 3rd year's funding, so I guess they understand. I mean, not everything works out perfectly.
Students are a very big fluctuation in the progress of a research idea, right? So about every variety of ways that things can go differently because of a student leaving or coming or going is something that the program officers have already seen before, right? So.
And it sounds like the relationship that you have with your program officer is very important. Because you would want to get that report, and you hadn't talked to him about it, and you didn't know, and all of a sudden you hit him with this. You were talking to him through this year, so it was no big surprise, and he helped guide you. So I think, again, just having that relationship with your program officer is so important.
I'll give one more little tip that I did. Is like when I wasn't sure if I was going to get funded the 2nd time, I knew I was going to get an answer at least pretty soon. We were already into like the late March, so I knew an answer was coming. At the same time, we had a paper that I was working on that was in line with the same research as this proposal. And I went really slow with it because what I said is if I didn't end up getting funded for the proposal, I can then submit this paper and put that funding idea on there. Now I've already got a paper submitted
In your first
on
year.
the proposal, right?
I did the
And then, yeah, And then when I submitted the report, I had that paper of my first year, and I had another paper about to be submitted, but I waited so that that could be put on my next report. So I'm sort of like staging the publications to make sure I have one in every year, you know. It's a strategy.
Those are the kind of things I'm sure as an assistant professor, it's good to hear strategy, right? Any other last comments? Something you would like them to know that would be important that maybe we haven't covered?
So I'll convey some advice that I got. So there are, I don't know if this happens for all the different areas, but there was another career workshop that I attended, and it was held by two people that are in my field of science, and most of the attendees there were in like organic materials and stuff like that. So keep your eyes out for, you know, maybe people that in your field that you know are working sort of in similar areas, having these types of workshops. You might be able to go and meet some people that do your type of research and can give you more specific advice in your area. But that being said, I did one of these and got some really good advice. Professor Jeff Moore was just here. He's a National Academy member. He won a career early in his career, and I was shocked when he said that he spends over 50% of his time on the first page of a proposal. That's where he focuses all his time, is on that first page. And then the rest of the 50% of the time on the remaining 14 pages. And he stands by having a one image that captures the whole idea of the proposal on that first page. And then surrounding that image with a very concise message of what they want to do, why you want to do it, how you're going to do it. And it was great advice. I've tried to model that for my proposals.
So I do editing for these as well. It's one of my roles within ORD, and I've edited these proposals for the last 5 years. And I can tell you that from my experience, I spend the vast majority of my editing time on the first page as well. It's really, I've heard that reviewers decide whether or not they're going to fund you on that first page and then spend the subsequent pages justifying their initial decision.
So if you've lost them in the first page, you're probably not going to get them back.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's like a first impression, right? This is just like humanity. This is humans that are reading these proposals, and that first page is a first impression. So it should be focused on a nice image. I stand by that too. A really nice image that sort of brings the reader into the storyline.
And by image, you don't mean actual image. You mean your writing should convey this.
No, he means like a schematic or
Yeah.
some sort of figure.
So like when you submit papers, you have what they call the table of contents graphic. It's like a graphic that's supposed to show you kind of an overview of what the entirety of the publication is telling you.
Graphical abstract.
Yeah, a graphical abstract, something like that. There you go.
Abstract.
Yeah.
Okay.